What time is it? It's nation time.
Greetings and welcome to the Afterwords program. I'm Bible Contensa, your host. I'm joined by Cardinal and by Chewy, this week's preacher of our sermon. It's time for a spiritual transfusion. Welcome to the Afterwards program, Cardinal and Bayou. Thank you for today's sermon. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
The scripture from the day for today's sermon come from the book of Acts, 2nd chapter, verses 14 through 18. Help us understand the concept of spiritual transfusion and the need for a spiritual revolution.
So what the apostles of Jesus experienced at Pentecost, right, was a transfer of spiritual energy and power. That's what I'm calling a spiritual transfusion. And from time to time in our lives, depending on what's going on, we all need that, right? Think about somebody who's lonely, depressed, sad, lethargic. Your body is trying to tell you that your spirit is weighted, that it needs some reboosting, some rejuvenation, right? So we know what it is, but in a culture where we're driven by material needs, we don't focus on our spiritual needs. And that's really sad because so many of us turn to substances, right, to fill those voids of unhappiness and darkness that we have, when actually what the body is calling for is a spiritual transfusion.
As I checked out the sermon and thought about Pentecost and the idea of spiritual transfusion and the idea of Pentecost, which is rarely talked about in the more traditional church, how does this to me suggest that it's something that has to happen within us as opposed to some entity coming external to us to make us whole or better? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, you got to seek, right? That's what the scripture says. If you seek, you'll find. And that's why Jesus instructed his disciples to stay in the city, because he knew the Pentecost festival was forthcoming. And for the Essene community and for those Jews who were part of the righteous remnant, they believed that Pentecost was the most important festival. And so he urged them to stay in the city so that they could find that spiritual nourishment that they needed. You had all of the righteous remnant coming together for that festival. And so for them, that was the most important time to be engaged and to get the renewal that they desperately needed after his crucifixion.
How do those of us that may be in alignment with God today relate to the Essene community, and say a little about who they are? Because I don't think many people really know the role that Essenes played.
Yeah, so the Bible doesn't speak about the Essenes using that term, that terminology. The Bible calls them the way, the poor. So they had several names, excuse me, that they were called by. But John the Baptist was a part of the Essene community. And so his whole story is really an Essene story. So we know it, but we don't know it. If you don't know Jewish history, then you won't know that there were different sects of Jews, and the Essenes were just one of those communities that set themselves apart to be devoted to the covenant and the law, so that God would send a messianic hope to restore Israel. So these were the purest, I guess I could say, the most committed, devoted Jews who believed that God would send them a Messiah if they practice righteous living. So that's why they separated themselves from the city and from the influence of Hellenism, which was pervasive in Judea in New Testament times. You had the Roman government controlling a lot of the major cities. And so they had all these Roman influences, and which violated their covenant and their law. their religious practice. So that's why they left the cities and separated themselves and said, we're not bound down to Caesar. We only have one God. And that's what set them apart. And that's what allowed them, right, to be the keepers of the spiritual essence of Judaism.
Thank you for that. You also talk about cognitive dissonance. Uh, Tell us a little more about what cognitive dissonance is and how and its ability to impact our ability to respond to this calculated and coordinated white revolution that's unfolding as we speak.
Okay, good question. So cognitive dissonance is a psychological terminology that refers to, it's kind of like a brain fog. When you're overloaded with information and when you're overloaded with feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, you're kind of in a brain fog, and that best described as cognitive dissonance. In other words, your thinking is blocked. You're not thinking clearly. You can't really see reality for what it is. So Black people are in that state of cognitive dissonance more often than not because of our circumstances, because of the things that happen in our community and in our lives that keep us torn between giving up or blind rage. Those are usually our two uh, ways of responding to our cognitive dissonance. Either we just become hopeless or we strike out in blind rage, which is self-destructive as well. So the times we live in now, it really raises the level of cognitive dissonance within Black people and keeps us confused about what our response should be, uh, and what is the path of the future? What does the future look like? Is there a future? Is there any hope?
And you expressed that for 70 plus years, we've been building upon and employing African ways of knowing within the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. How does that apply today, and how does it manifest in the work that we've done in terms of addressing the issues faced by our people?
Well, one thing we've always believed that all religious knowledge begins in Africa. And so all religions have their source, their foundation in traditional African ways of knowing and understanding. So it doesn't matter if it's Christianity or Buddhism, whatever it is, it African people created, right? We created spiritual tradition. We created religious systems. And the thing I think we need to understand too is that we didn't create dogma and doctrine. We created ritual and practice. We created observances and rites. And so all of these things are part of every religion, no matter what it is. So as keepers of those traditions, we have always, and I'm talking about the church now, the PAOCC has always been open to many spiritual paths, knowing that any spiritual path can open us to the power of God, no matter what it is. So there are many ways to find that spiritual transfusion that we so desperately need.
And you, near the end of the sermon, you summon us, excuse me, summon us to realize or actualize the need to restructure, reimagine, and repurpose our movement. How are we doing that through the programs of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church and Best Self Theology?
Well, we're doing it by intentionally looking at our legacy and seeing what has served us well and why it has served us well and what we can do to leverage those institutional mechanisms that we've already created. And then also at the same time looking at what else do we need, right? What do we need that will empower the next generation to continue the struggle for African self-determination, independence, and dignity everywhere in the world? So it looks different in terms of what the needs are and what the voids are, but it also looks different in terms of what the next generation has to bring, right, to those institutions we've already established. What we don't realize is that the whole government is being deconstructed. We are in the midst of a white revolution. Where's the black revolution? The black revolution has to be in the work that we're doing to reimagine and to redevelop the institutional mechanisms we need to provide for our own survival. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to rescue us as this House bill that's going through right now, where they're getting ready to snatch millions and millions of dollars from Medicaid and SNAP and all these federal programs that black people disproportionately depend on. Once they pull the rug on it, then what are we going to do? We're going to have to figure out something. We're going to have to figure out how to take care of our survival needs. And this is not the first time in our history in America where we had to figure it out for ourselves. So the good news is that we got a blueprint. And we can use that blueprint and leverage that blueprint for what we need to do now.
Thank you very much, Cardinal. We appreciate the powerful sermon and this insightful conversation. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We appreciate your ongoing contributions, and we urge our viewers and listeners to continue to tune in on Sunday mornings at 11:30 for powerful sermons and for the engaging conversation that follows. And I like to conclude with the words of our patron saint, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will.
What time is it? It's nation time.